In the aftermath of Hurricane Maria's devastation, many Puerto Ricans fled the Caribbean island to stay with families in Chicago. A month later, they have learned that the path home may be a long and winding road. Some remain in the Chicago area, while others have moved farther south on the mainland to be closer to home. Some families have split for now, with one or more members back in Puerto Rico, while others wait out the cleanup. And still others are only just arriving at O'Hare. Eva Gonzalez Monclova, 83, said she and her son are relying on relatives while they wait for the island to stabilize. She flew to Chicago to stay with her daughter in Oak Park, then to another relative's home in Texas, then another in Arizona, and she may make another stop in Florida, but there is no telling when she'll return home. You leave the place where you've lived all your life. You leave all your belongings, although material things are not important, Gonzalez Monclova said in Spanish. You can't help or even give condolences to the people. It's very difficult. Chicago, home to more than 100,000 people of Puerto Rican descent, has seen at least 1,600 people evacuate from Puerto Rico on humanitarian flights to O'Hare International Airport, said Alicia Tatanado, the executive director for Chicago's Office of Emergency Management and Communications. Leaving place you've lived all your life, Gonzalez Monclova and her son, who both traveled to the U.S. after the storm, are relying on relatives while they wait for the island to stabilize. As her road home zigzags across the United States, she said she's felt the tug of war between her own desire to return home and her daughter's wish for her to remain in the United States. I'm independent, Gonzalez Monclova said. I drive everywhere by myself, but her daughter Nilda Flores Gonzalez, speaking in Spanish and English, said yes, but it's not the same when you have to be hustling around and finding food. It's a feeling that only I know, Gonzalez Monclova said. Flores Gonzalez noticed her mother had trouble making decisions in the days after she arrived in Chicago. She said she thinks her mother was likely in shock that she'd been uprooted overnight. While Gonzalez Monclova was staying in Oak Park last month, she had trouble sleeping, she recalled. Thoughts of people left without food and the possibility of diseases spreading in Puerto Rico kept her up. Instead of being happy, enjoying my daughters, I don't feel like that, Gonzalez Monclova said in Spanish. I feel like my duty was to stay and help, but I couldn't help at my age. If Gonzalez Monclova remains in United States much longer, or even permanently, her daughters said at some point they will have to find her a new set of doctors. She's supposed to have regular checkups to make sure her breast cancer doesn't return. A storm and a separation. Manuel Torres Marquez and Dinah Courtright Roig briefly bunked with their son in his Lakeview East apartment in the first weeks after the storm hit and they fled Puerto Rico. Now he is back in their San Juan home while she is staying for now with their other son in Florida. When the husband and wife left Puerto Rico in late September, Courtright Roig said she felt like a character in a dramatic movie fleeing her home. Dinah Courtright Roig watches live music with her husband, Manuel Torres Marquez, left at a cultural event at the Segundo Ruiz Belvis Cultural Center on October 12, 2017, in Chicago. Dinah and Manuel are staying with their son, Omar Torres Courtright, after leaving their home in Puerto Rico following the devastation of Hurricane Maria. Kristen Norman, Chicago Tribune. When you come here, you are like in this shock, she told the Tribune as she sat in her son's Chicago apartment in recent weeks. You have to process the whole feeling, and you haven't had time to visualize yourself in just a couple of weeks or months afterwards. These days Torres Marquez is teaching college courses on a sweltering, tarp-covered patio. Evening classes at Universidad Interamericana de Puerto Rico are now daytime, weekend classes. And a face mask must be worn when he ventures into his office filled with dust and possible mold. Without electricity, the university hasn't been able to do a heavy-duty scrubbing of the buildings. The powerful Category 4 storm, which killed more than 50 people and injured dozens of others, knocked out the island's power grid. Torres Marquez, like a majority on the island, still doesn't have electricity at home. Tap water must be boiled before it can be used, consumed, or used to cook. The couple's home is habitable, but the family room can no longer be used because the windows and walls were damaged by the strong winds and water. He's unsure when the repairs will get made now that their budget is tighter, construction supplies are low and other more heavily damaged homes could take priority. While the island is still cleaning up, Torres Marquez said he feels optimistic as he sees strangers in line for gasoline ask each other with sincere concern about their families. I have hope, Torres Marquez said in Spanish. Reconstruction is slow, but you are starting to feel it. When the couple will reunite isn't exactly clear. Courtright Roig, 65, said she has some health issues. And while government officials reported most hospitals in Puerto Rico are open again, Torres Marquez, 66, said in a phone interview from Puerto Rico that medical office hours remain irregular more than a month after the hurricane. That's one reason why she's staying in Florida for a few more weeks. The couple wanted to be home for the long holiday season, a typically jubilant time in Puerto Rico. This Christmas for us, Torres Marquez said in Spanish as he started to tear up, will be different. Street holiday celebrations, which typically last from November to January, will probably be scaled back to more intimate settings in people's homes, Courtright Roig said. I also think a lot of people will be missed at that time, she said. Unfortunately, many young couples with children or young professionals will just stay in the States. For us, it's like, where do we start again? We just have to get stronger. Staying in Chicago, of the 1,500 plus people who boarded humanitarian flights bound for Chicago, about 135 had asked the city for some kind of assistance as of late October, according to the city's emergency management office. Cristina Pacianez, co-chair for the Chicago-based Puerto Rican Agenda, thinks the number could be higher. People are staying with their family, she said. They might be using their resources instead of calling the city. Gov. Bruce Rauner announced last week that he wanted Illinois to serve as a host state for people displaced by Hurricane Maria. For some families who fled Puerto Rico, Chicago will become their new home. Jesus Gomez, 40, flew with his 70-year-old mother, Elena Rodriguez Gomez, from Quebrada Arenas to Chicago this past Sunday to stay with one of his sisters. The hurricane left them without any means of communication, and relatives in the States at one point thought they were dead. He said, "There is no going back to Puerto Rico," said Gomez, who once called Chicago home. "My house is not good enough to go back there, and my mother's house is not good enough to go back there. We are going to stay here and start from zero." His first days in Chicago were spent in a corner room at Stroger Hospital after having gone weeks without medication for diabetes. Once he is released from the hospital, he'll be living out of his sister's dining room until the family manages to come up with enough money to get them their own apartment. "I don't know what's going to happen," he said from his hospital bed last week. "I'm just anxious, emotional, just stressed and happy that my health is getting better. That's one thing that I'm happy for," the Associated Press contributed. M. Malagan at ChicagoTribune.com, Twitter at Elvia Malagan. Related Puerto Ricans fleeing storm's devastation find refuge with family in Chicago area. Chicago Hamilton cast members rise up for Puerto Rico.